Welcome to our class on Chassidus. We're going to be learning a beautiful Chassidic discourse from the Rebbe. The name of the Chassidic discourse is called VaHechrim Hashem. The Rebbe said this Chassidic discourse in the year Tafshin Mem Tes, 33 years ago, and the Rebbe went on to certify and edit the Chassidic discourse right after Pesach in that year in Tafshin Mem Tes. So again, the Chassidic discourse is based on the verse from the prophet Isaiah, which we also say in the Haftorah of Achrein Shal Pesach, the last day of Pesach. So the prophet says as follows: VaHechrim Hashem es Lashon Yam Mitzrayim. Hashem is going to dry up the sea of Egypt. V'heinif Yodei al Anar Bayom Ruchoi, and he's going to smite the river with tremendous power and tremendous strength. So the Rebbe brings from the Rebbe Maharash, who's the fourth Chabad Rebbe, and he's known as L'chatchila HaRibber. That means if you should begin with, you should go above and beyond. And he explains this verse at length in a classic Chassidic discourse of the Rebbe Maharash called VaHechrim. And he says as follows: besides the fact that in the future when Moshiach comes, VaHechrim Hashem is going to dry up the sea of Egypt, just like he did when we went out of Mitzrayim, Egypt, the first time. He's also going to go ahead and he's going to put his hand on the river, which means that he's going to split the river, which is much higher than splitting of the sea when we went out of Egypt. And like the Rebbe Maharash explains in that Chassidic discourse at length, the extra power and the extra energy that's going to take place when Mashiach comes. And he brings out the main novel idea, the main chiddush, the main new idea. What's going to happen when Mashiach comes is that there's going to be the Kiyas Hanar, where the river is going to go ahead and be split. And like the verse says, Hafach Yom Le'Yavasha, that he's Banar Yavar Beregel, which means he's going to go ahead and switch the Yam, the sea, which is normally wet, and he's going to turn it into a dry land. And that's referring to Hafach Yom, though he did it in the times of going out of Egypt, when he split the sea. And that's when we left Egypt. But the second part of the verse where it says that we're going to go on our feet into the river is referring to the splitting of the Nar, which is going to be when Mashiach comes. And the fact that we're going to be able to go into the Nahar by foot, which is going to be totally split, that's the true and novel idea what's going to happen when Mashiach comes. So whatever happened in Egypt was amazing. But when Mashiach comes, it's going to be a whole different level. And Rebbe says something very powerful, and he says like this. So, the Hechrim, this is the verse starts and says that he's going to take the sea of Egypt, and it's going to dry up, which is referring to when we went out of Egypt. What does it say afterwards? V'heinif Yodei al Anar, he's going to put his hand on the river, is referring to when Mashiach comes. But it's in the same verse. So why are they both topics, going out of Egypt and the future redemption, in the same verse? So the Rebbe says the reason why it's in the same verse to teach us that going out of Egypt, which is basically the redemption from Egypt, and the ultimate redemption, they can happen one after the other. The way we look at it, we went out of Egypt thousands of years ago, and Mashiach's going to come sometime in the future. But there is the fact that in the same verse, just like we went out of Egypt, right then we could have had the ultimate redemption. In other words, there doesn't have to be a gap between us going out of Egypt and the future redemption, L'heinif Yodei Aliyar, which is going to be in the future. And especially, the Rebbe says, to recap, what the Rebbe is saying is the fact that they're both in the same verse, going out of Egypt and the future redemption, that means it can happen simultaneously, one after the other. And especially, the Rebbe says that we're in Achrein Shal Pesach, when the Rebbe said the Chassidic discourse, and over there in the Haftorah of Achrein Shal Pesach, we speak about the ultimate redemption, and on Achrein Shal Pesach we eat the feast of Mashiach. And the feast of Mashiach and the reading of the Haftorah about the future redemption comes right after what? The seventh day of Pesach. And what happened on the seventh day of Pesach? That's when Hashem split the sea. So you see there's a direct connection between the seventh day of Pesach splitting the sea of going out of Egypt and the revelation of Mashiach comes. Now, since this connection is a verse in the Torah, so it's part of Torah. And since it's part of Torah, we know that Torah is an inheritance that belongs to everybody. Like it says in the Torah clearly, Torah tziva lanu Moshe. Moshe ran and commanded us the Torah. My Rasha kehilas Yaakov. It's an inheritance to everybody. So the idea, the fact that it's a connection, is not just this holy people. The Torah belongs to everybody. And the Torah says, going out of Egypt, right afterwards, the ultimate redemption, it applies to everybody. That means every single one of us have the power and have the ability, men, women, children, to go straight from Kriyas Yam, so splitting of the sea, which took place in Egypt, the 7th day of Pesach. Right away, we can all go to the ultimate redemption without even waiting, even like the blink of an eye. And what the Rebbe is saying is that we can go from going out of Egypt straight into the ultimate redemption is actually brought out in the Haftorah that we read in Achron Shal Pesach, that we're going to read in Achron Shal Pesach. What does it say in the Haftorah of Achron Shal Pesach? It speaks of the Moshiach, the Messiah. And it says, V'nacha olav ruach Hashem. A spirit of Hashem is going to be on the Messiah. And who is that referring to? V'nacha olav on him is referring to Mashiach. As the verse says, V'yatza choyter migeza yishai. So seemingly, V'nacha olav is exclusively speaking on the Mashiach. It's going to come upon on the Messiah is going to have a spirit of Hashem. But nevertheless, the Rebbe says, the fact is that it was established a Jewish custom that every single Jewish person on the holidays, and the prayer that we say uniquely when we open up the ark. So we open the ark, normally we say regular Vahi ben Sayah. But on the holidays, an extra prayer that we say. And in the prayer, what do we say in that prayer? It says, V'yiskayim banu. It should be fulfilled within us. The verse that says, V'nacha olav ruach Hashem. That the Spirit of Hashem should be upon us. And what's the prayer saying? That every single Jewish person, specifically, every single unique individual, should have the revelation. And what kind of a revelation? A revelation of a Nacha olav ruach Hashem. It quotes the verse that the Spirit of Hashem, just like it's going to be on Mashiach, should be on each and every one of us, with all the details of the verse, which means v'hein if yadei amar, etc. So what the Rebbe is bringing out from here is that going out of Egypt and the future redemption, they can come one after the other. And it applies to everyone. Just like as the Rebbe says, like the prophet says, V'nachal olav ruach Hashem. And it applies to every one of us can have that powerful spirit. No, so what are we waiting for? Let's go to Moshiach. Let's experience the ultimate redemption. And the Rebbe says the fact is Moshiach revealing himself and us experiencing the ultimate redemption of Mashiach is dependent on, I'll say the two words in Hebrew, Maseinu v'avodaseinu, our actions and our spiritual work. Which basically means that when we do our mitzvot, and there's many, thank God, there's 613 opportunities to do mitzvahs. So when we do our mitzvahs, that creates the redemption. And not only does it create the global redemption, but it actually creates a personal redemption of a person doing a mitzvah. In other words, when a person does a mitzvah, when you're doing a mitzvah, you create for yourself true freedom. Literally, when we do a mitzvah, we are creating true freedom for ourselves. And like the Rebbe says, like it's explained at length in Tanya, in the Alter Rebbe's Tanya, in the section of the holy letters, the 4th letter. So the Alter Rebbe explains it there at length. And he ties it in with the verse that says, Pada b'shalom nafshi, that my soul is redeemed in peace. And the author explains over there very, very deeply and very, very methodically that when a person does a mitzvah, you're literally taking your soul out of exile. You're literally freeing your soul. You're allowing yourself to connect to the infinite God. You're basically taking away all the concealment and all the limitations of exile, and you can literally experience freedom when you're doing a mitzvah. So if you want to have freedom, there's the global freedom, Mashiach comes. But if you want to experience personal freedom, anytime you do a mitzvah, you're a free person. Your soul gets out of the shell. It connects to the infinite. And the Rebbe says, and to add to that point, that the personal redemption, Pada b'shalom nafshi, my soul is redeemed in peace by doing a mitzvah, which happens by doing a mitzvah. So it's not only while you're doing the mitzvah, but it has an effect afterwards. You're going to say, what do you mean? So I'm doing a mitzvah, I'm free. 5 minutes later, I'm in exile. Everyone says, no. You do a mitzvah, you're free, but guess what? The freedom lasts afterwards as well. And like the author explains in Tanya, about when a person does a mitzvah, so you create a yichud. A yichud means you create a oneness with Hashem. Anytime you do a mitzvah, you're becoming one with Hashem. Now, when your person becomes one with Hashem, since Hashem is infinite, so the connection is also infinite. It's called in Hebrew a yichud nitzchi, a everlasting oneness. And when you create the everlasting ones by doing a mitzvah, that affects you literally down here. You become one with Hashem. So the same thing also, when a person goes out of exile by doing a mitzvah, pada b'shalom nafshi, when you do a mitzvah, when you redeem your soul by doing a mitzvah, so it's not just while you're doing the mitzvah. It has an everlasting effect on a spiritual level and also down in this world. And like it says in Chazal, whoever learns Torah, you're creating peace in the heavenly abode and down here. Because by learning Torah, you're creating a freedom for yourself and a freedom for the Shekhinah, and it's an everlasting connection. And the personal redemption which is created by doing a mitzvah has a residual effect, and not only for 5 minutes later, or 10 minutes later, or a day later. Literally, it has an impact on your whole life, in every single part of your day that you're busy with afterwards. And when after we experience the personal freedom, then we can have the ultimate freedom, the general freedom, where the verse says clearly, "V'hoisal Hashem hamlucha." You know what freedom is? When Hashem is going to be the king over the world. When everyone's going to recognize, and the world is going to recognize that Hashem is a king on a spiritual level and also on a practical level. That's the ultimate freedom. So what the Rebbe is explaining is, to recap, is that we can each have our personal freedom by doing a mitzvah. And not only when you're doing the mitzvah, but when you do the mitzvah, it has an effect on you afterwards as well. And once we each have our personal freedom, and then Hashem's presence is felt in the world, that's when we'll ultimately have the ultimate redemption, the ultimate freedom. And Rebbe continues on to say as follows: besides the fact that anytime a person learns Torah, and a person does a mitzvah, which is called Maseinu v'Avodaseinu, so we actually bring the redemption closer, and we make it a reality. But there's actually a skula. There's a special, remedy, and there's a special energy that's created specifically with things which are connected to Moshiach. Because generally, learning Torah and doing mitzvahs, you become free. And when you become free, it lasts while you're learning Torah and you're doing mitzvahs, even afterwards. But then if we ultimately want to be focused on bringing the redemption, so there's certain specific things that you can do to bring about the redemption. What are they? So for example, the Rebbe says that on the last day of Pesach, to eat the feast of Mashiach. We know the last day of Pesach, what we do is we wash, we eat matzah, we drink 4 cups of wine or 4 cups of grape juice, whatever you're able to drink. And when we talk about Mashiach, that's what will bring Mashiach. And it was just like the 4 cups of wine that we drank in the first night of Pesach. Why do we drink 4 cups of wine? Because that is connected to the 4 different expressions of redemption where it speaks out in the Torah, in reference to going out of Egypt. So the same thing also, when you drink the 4 cups of wine by the Sudas Mashiach on the last day of Pesach, it's also connected to the ultimate redemption. In other words, they both have 4 levels of redemption. Going out of Egypt, and that's for the first night of Passover, the second night of Passover, and the last night of Passover, when we drink the 4 cups, that's for the 4 levels of redemption, what's going to happen when Mashiach comes. And what's the connection with the 4 levels of expression of redemption in reference to Mashiach coming? And Rebbe says, based on, we know that in terms of the ultimate redemption, we drink the 4 cups of wine in Achar Pesach. Why is that? Because the 4 cups are connected to 4 different expressions of Geula, which is going to happen when Mashiach comes. And we see specifically in the prophets, it says clearly when Mashiach comes, what's going to happen? So the prophet says, Hashem is going to gather us from where? From the Arba Kamfais Aretz, from the 4 corners of the world. So you see that drinking the cups, besides the fact that it coincides with the 4 different levels of redemption, but it's also connected to the fact that when Mashiach comes, Hashem is going to gather us from all 4 corners of the world. And it's possible also to add that on the last night of Pesach, the Sudas Mashiach, we have the same amount of cups, 4 cups, just like the first night and the second night. In other words, why is that? To bring out the same point as before, that in order to go from the first redemption, going out of Egypt, that's what we drink the 4 cups in the first 2 nights of Passover, and to go to the ultimate redemption, and that's why we drink the 4 cups on the last night of Passover, Mashiach. So you see that it's to create the connection that you don't have to have a gap. That you can have literally a redemption down this physical world. Just like we left Egypt, we're free, we're not in Egypt anymore. So the same thing also, every one of us can experience the ultimate redemption by drinking the 4 cups of wine on the last night of Pesach. And especially, the Rebbe says, that Maseinu v'Avodaseinu, which means learning Torah and doing mitzvahs. What we do today, the Rebbe says, it's a fascinating idea. We're like a midget on a giant. Why? Because when we learn today and we do mitzvahs today, it comes after the tremendous learning and mitzvahs and the tremendous spiritual impact that the previous Chabad Rebbeim had in all the generations. Starting with, and the Rebbe, as it mentions, every one of the Chabad rabbis to draw in their energy, starting with the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe, the second Chabad Rebbe, the Mittler Rebbe, the third Chabad Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, the fourth one, the Rebbe Maharash, the fourth, the Rebbe Nishmasa Eidim, and the fifth one, the sixth one, the Frierdiker Rebbe, and so since we are coming after all their effort, so how much more so that we, with our effort of learning Torah and doing mitzvahs, and especially the Rebbe says, eating the Sudas Moshiach and drinking the 4 cups of wine in Nachal Pesach, we can bring the redemption right away. And in the point of Keheref Ayimam, it's literally like a blink of an eye. And Rebbe finished off and he says, it should be the will of Hashem that the redemption should happen in a revealed way, up to the point that everyone literally with their finger be able to point and say, here is Mashiach. Just like we're sitting in the Sudas Mashiach, everyone can point and say, here's the matzah, here's the wine. The same way we'll be able to point and say, here's Mashiach. And on an internal level, we know, just like, for example, when it comes to the Sudas Mashiach, we eat the matzah, we internalize it, and we drink the wine, we internalize it. It becomes part of our flesh. So the same thing also, Mashiach is going to become part of who we are. And it's going to happen in a way of simcha, with tremendous joy, with tuv levav and gladness of heart, and literally very, very soon, very, very quickly, take it from miyad mamash. Hashem is going to take us out of the galus, and as we know, the loy ikvan afir keref ayin, when the time for Mashiach's arrival is going to come, Hashem is not going to even hold back, even like the blink of an eye. So let's hope and pray that we celebrate Achron Shal Pesach like we're supposed to, by having a feast for Mashiach, eating the matcha, drinking the 4 cups of wine, and as the Rebbe said, literally from going out of Egypt, we're celebrating going out of Egypt in the first 7 days of Pesach. We'll all experience the ultimate redemption, and God willing, our next class will be in Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh. Have a happy Pesach, and as most importantly, we should have the true simcha and the simcha of the Gula, Hamitis Vashlema, and next class will be in Eretz Yisrael. Have a great and happy Pesach.